Hey there. Happy Wednesday. Today we're going to talk a little bit about how I go about lighting daylight interiors. Not this specific interior, because I didn't light this. I just kind of sat next to this window because I'm lazy. The one we're talking about today is from a current commercial project I'm working on with my friends over at Bandit Cinema, a wonderful production company in Philadelphia. Anyways, let's get into the lighting. Anytime I'm lighting a daylight interior, I want my big lights up first. This allows me to set our ambience and give me kind of like a good starting base to work from. I know some people like to light the talent first and then light the background. I like to do it in reverse because if I can't light the background, then I know that I need to shrink the size of our background, which is way less work to do that first and then light the talent versus we spend, a good amount of time lighting the talent to perfection and then go to light the background and then, oh no, we don't have enough firepower to light our background and we need to, now move everything we set up for the talent and the background and move it all in. I like to light the background first. We had 3 windows outside of this living room, so I knew I wanted to punch in most of my light coming from those windows. We had a Nova 600 and a Aperture 300X with a spotlight mount on it outside of that front window, which was the window we were keying our talent through. Outside that back window, we had another Nova, a Nova 300, and a 600X with a reflector dish, I believe. All my lights were set to 3200 Kelvin because I was kind of going for that kind of late afternoon, early morning, sunrise, sunset kind of vibe in the living room. So I wanted that warm light, and I thought it would go really nice with the complexion of his skin. Along with that, the reason why I had a point source and a panel outside of both of our windows is because I wanted a nice mix of hard and soft light. To me, this just feels like a much more natural way for the light to come through windows because when, you do have window light, some of it is hard, some of it is soft. Now, the one thing I probably could have done differently is I probably could have adjusted the color temperature of the soft light versus the hard light a little bit differently because the hard light would probably be a little bit warmer than the soft light. But for this, I liked the look of just all of the light set at 3200. That brings me to the light that we had outside of our final window, which was the window in the back there. And outside that, I had my gaffer set up I believe it was a 200X at 5600 Kelvin, so much cooler than our main lights. This was just to kind of give us some color contrast, and I did also have this be a hard light instead of kind of a soft ambient cooler push through that back window, which might have felt more realistic. But I wanted a kind of hard point source out there because, as you can see, it kind of gave these nice specular highlights on the wall and kind of just edging him out on the back of his head and just giving us a little bit of color separation, adding a little bit more depth. Because for me personally with commercial projects, I think it's okay not to really be as realistic as maybe a more narrative piece. And you can kind of take creative liberties. So in this case here, we have, sunlight that is 2 different color temperatures coming from 2 different directions. But I think it looks better than not having it there. So that's why I put it in there. And I'm very happy with it. Obviously, ask the director you're working with if they're okay with it looking kind of unrealistic. I mean, I don't think most people would notice it, but it's like, I don't know. If it looks better, I think it's fine. For this project, it worked, and I like the look of it. From there, I was very happy with where the windows themselves were sitting, kind of the hard slashes that were coming in and hitting all the things in the room, where it was hitting on the couch and our talent's body. But I still felt like our overall room ambience or our room tone was still a little bit low. So I had my gaffer Vin set up a 1200D with a spotlight mount with a quarter CTO gel on the front of it, kind of just bouncing into the ceiling, and then with the cutters on the spotlight mount, I had him kind of cut it so it wasn't bouncing back and hitting the walls directly, but kind of just filling the space with this kind of directionless light, which is really the goal of kind of when you're trying to have kind of a room tone rig or something that's adding ambience to your room. You don't want it to see the direction that it's coming from. And so I had him set that 1200D up on key side because we want that fill to still be coming from the side where all of our light is coming from. If you have it kind of bouncing to the ceiling on the fill side, it kind of tends to feel a little bit less real. So it wasn't, like I said, it was cut off the walls when it was bouncing down originally, so it was like just left of kind of the center of the room. That way it kind of still felt like it was more naturally coming from those windows. And this technique of kind of bouncing a 1200D into the ceiling to kind of add our room tone, our room ambience, is a total game changer. It really just helps to kind of make your lights, if you're working with smaller fixtures, feel less sourcey. Which is something that I'm obviously looking for with using smaller fixtures on a project like this. Now, I will say you do need a pretty powerful light to do this. So if you're going to try this, make sure you have at minimum like a 600X. Anything lower than that is not going to really do anything. 600X is still borderline, like it'll do a little bit. But 1200 and above is pretty much what you want to be kind of doing this technique of bouncing it and cutting it on the ceiling. But I really suggest you try this out because it's something that I think is a super handy technique. After that was all set and I felt kind of the room tone was in a place that I was happy with, I popped on my key light, which for this was a Pavo Slim, the 2x1 panel. So I didn't opt to put a 4x frame in front of it like I would most cases do, because since we were kind of playing off a little bit of a harder light coming through our windows, I didn't want the key light to feel super, super soft and wrappy. I wanted to have a little bit of edge to it, so I decided to leave it just as the panel with our diffusion on there and not diffuse it any further, which I'm very happy with the look that we got from this, and I think it blended really nicely with our lights that were coming from the window. We had this at 3200 Kelvin as well, and I want to say the brightness of it was probably at like 60%. These lights are freaking bright, man. Like, I know they're not like actually like that high in wattage, but they feel like really a ton of output. And then finally, the last thing we added was just a tube light kind of up above our talent's head with black wrap on it, kind of just directing that light straight down, just to kind of pepper his hair and the headphones a little bit to kind of help give a little bit more level to those things and make sure we weren't ruining our contrast, which is why we put the black wrap on it. And then for the close-up, we did literally the exact same thing. We didn't move anything other than our key light. We just moved that in a little bit to soften out that light a little bit, because as you're moving in for close-ups, you do want to, polish things up a little bit. So we moved it in. When we moved it in, it was obviously too bright now, so we turned it down to kind of match where we were in the wide. But now, obviously, we have a little bit of a softer key, which looked nice, and then everything else stayed the same. For the phone shot, that was also, again, pretty much the same setup. It was all we did was just kind of change the angle of the spotlight mount to kind of get some nice highlights across that table, and then we moved the Pavo Slim kind of behind the table over here to kind of etch out the phone from that direction. And that's pretty much all we did for this. It was a pretty simple setup. If it does feel like a big setup to you or it feels a little bit overwhelming, I totally get that. I feel that way quite often. And the thing that kind of helps me when I feel like that is thinking about how like this is literally just basic 3-point lighting, except for just expanded. And that's all lighting pretty much ever is you're doing the same thing you would do when you first learned how to, light with a softbox and maybe like a one light behind the head and a little fill light. Like, it's just that setup, except for we're just expanding it out and doing it now for a whole house instead of just for one talent. So instead of having, your key light right next to your talent and your hair light right behind them and then your fill light right over here, we're just moving that back. We're using larger fixtures and doing the same thing. That's all I got for today. Hopefully you found some use out of this, or it was at least a little bit helpful to you. Maybe it wasn't helpful and you thought the setup was horrible, and maybe that makes you feel better about your lighting. I don't know. But hopefully you got something from this. If not, sorry. And yeah, I'll see you next week.